knows.
You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Our latest Sing the Mix official. Welcome to 16 years, 24 episodes of the Chris Voss Show. Man, we're just banging out just the most wonderful content that you could ever imagine with the most best guests that can change your life, improve the quality of your status, and people around you will be like, holy crap, that Chris Voss Show podcast audience dude is so gersh darn smart. They actually would say that. That's a quote. Anyway, we did a poll. Anyway, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss won on the TikTokity and all those crazy questions or all those crazy places on the internet. You can check us out. Today we're talking to an amazing man about his books, and his latest book that he has out September 10th, 2024. It is entitled Create Yourself Anew from Above Down by choosing who and what you prefer to be in this multiverse of possibilities. Andrew Cort is going to be joining us on the show today, and he's going to talk about some of his experience, some of his insights from his life's journey and authorship. Andrew has been involved in the healing arts since the 1970s when he studied chiropractic, nutrition, and AK. His appreciation for eclectic work began as he collaborated with MDs, herbalists, acupuncturists, massage therapists, and many others in Manhattan. Today, he maintains a healing practice in Woodstock, New York, via Zoom. He understands that all real healing is self-healing, and our power to do this comes from our oneness with the benevolent power of creation, in which all things, including healing, pain, naturally, physical, and spiritual wellness, abundance, love, and joy are always possible. Welcome to the show, Andrew. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Chris. Thank you. How are you doing?
I am excelente. Give me .coms or wherever you want people to find you on the interwebs.
Well, the best place to find me is on my website, which is andrewcort.com.
There you go.
Cort is spelled C-O-R-T. There's no U in it. So it's www.andrewcort.com.
There you go. So give us a 30,000 overview of what's inside this book.
Well, the book is about creating the life you choose. It's about manifestation, a very common word these days. There's a lot of books out there. Mm-hmm. The first part of my book is about really shifting your mindset. And everyone says that mindset is the first thing that has to change. But it's not just changing to a positive mindset. It's actually shifting, as the title suggests, to seeing the world from above down, seeing your life from above down. So it's shifting your mindset from thinking that what you need to do to create the life you want is fixing all the problems that you have, to shifting to the sacred divine being that you really are. And from that high place, that's where the real power to create comes from. That's where you're a creator, when you're part of the divine creation. So I shift people's mindset to understanding that appearance is not reality, and that there are different interpretations of scriptural ideas and spiritual ideas to make you remember who and what you really are. And it's not that you're not part of this world, but you're not of this world. You come from a higher place. And when you take your stance there and remember that, then you have real power. The second step, step after shifting the mindset is then to clear away all the debris of things that are in the way, blocking you and sabotaging you. That stop people from getting what they want. And that's just clearing the path. And then, and I think really sufficiently only then when the mindset is switched to a higher place of being and all that psychological debris is cleared away. Then you use the tools of manifesting what you want. Then you use affirmations and visualizations and gratitude journals and practicing happiness and practicing confidence and feeling worthy and all those pieces. And then the final 3 very short chapters of the book, once that's all done, is there's one on abundance, one on healing, and one on love.
And so when you say the divine, when you say, manifesting from above, is that applicable to any certain religion? There's kind of a lot of religions to that effect, and or is it religious? You mentioned we live in a what was the here? Let me pull the title here that I have. The multiverse. Some people think of the multiverse as thinking that we live in some sort of simulation. What does that refer to in your mind, and how you put it forward in the book?
Well, the multiverse is the very ancient idea, which has been revived in modern science since the 50s, when I think the word was first used by a quantum physicist. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, talks about we live in a multiverse. It could be used, different words that probably mean the same thing are multidimensional, different timelines, but there are all these different existences going on at one time. There's a wonderful analogy, I think, to a multiverse. Thinking of it like a television set. You're in your living room and you're watching Channel 4, and the telefrequency on the set, or that your remote is sending out to the set, brings in Channel 4. And that's all you see, is what's happening on that frequency. But there are shows running on Channel 5 and 6 and 7 and 100, and these days hundreds of shows running all at the same time, but you don't see them or experience them unless you change the channel. And changing the channel is changing the frequency that you send out. And that means changing yourself, your inner vibration. So that if you vibrate and your frequency matches a life of wealth and happiness, you draw yourself into that experience, which already exists, but you're not seeing it. And you don't fix your life, you change yourself. And you draw yourself into that new life.
There you go. There you go. So what gave you the reasoning to write this book? What was the motivation behind it, or epiphany where you're like, I need to put this pen to paper?
Well, I've been interested in spirituality for many, many years. I'm 74 now. I think my first move into spiritual ideas was when I was a late teens, early 20s. But there's been a lot of changes during those years. And simultaneously with my interest in spirituality, I started out in my early 20s with a lot of very serious health issues. I contracted or developed a very debilitating arthritis.
Oh, no.
And when I was 23 years old, I was living in central New York State, and I went up to Upstate Medical Center in Syracuse, a very good very good medical school and hospital, to get help. That time in my life, I always figured, well, the doctor will know what to do and just do it, and you'll be all better. That turned out not to be so. But I went, and what they advised me to do was to take about 10 aspirin a day.
10 aspirin a day. Wow.
Yeah. And I
That's a lot.
did that, and I didn't feel any better. And I went back, and they suggested 12 and then 15.
What?
I kept going back. And when they got to 20, when they suggested I take 20 aspirin a day, and I'm smart enough to be figuring already, I got enough problems. I don't need bleeding ulcers.
Yeah.
So this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Don't you have anything else you can offer me? And this doctor, and well, to be fair and transparent, he was a young intern, not a lot of experience, I guess, but he was a graduate of medical school, and he was my doctor there. And he told me that they did have some medicines that were much more powerful and could probably make me feel better, but he didn't want to give them to me until I was bedridden.
Jesus Christ.
And I was 23 years old, and I said, bedridden? When do you think that'll be? And he said, well, the way this is progressing, probably within about a year.
Wow.
Well, I walked away from medicine at that point. I
Yeah.
started getting into holistic ideas, got
Mhm.
some help, not perfect help, but some help, got very enthusiastic and went off to chiropractic school and practiced in Manhattan for 10 years. By the end of that 10 years, however, I was sad to have to just recognize that the arthritis did keep progressing. It had
Wow.
slowed down, but it was still progressing. And after
Mhm.
10 years, I had to give it up and went and did a whole bunch of other things in my life.
Wow.
But during all those years, I was pretty miserable.
Yeah.
I mean, I was pretty miserable because of my health. I was in pain and aching all the time, and I couldn't sleep. And I didn't have much enthusiasm for life or much strength, and I couldn't seem to make any money. I couldn't, seem to work. All the things that young guys do when they just know they need money to pay a bill, like construction or waiting on table. I couldn't do any of that.
Wow.
All frozen up and in pain. So money was always a problem, and I was miserable about that. And between being poverty-stricken and in pain all the time, women weren't thrilled with me. So my relationship history was pretty bad. And overall, I was just a gloomy, unhappy man.
Oh, wow.
Well, in my spiritual work, I came to the new idea, new to me, about 7 years or so ago, that maybe the purpose of life isn't to suffer and go through obstacles and grow and learn. Maybe it's really the experience of being happy and grateful and enjoying this incredible life.
And what you have, right?
Yeah, and then I asked, I noticed that, well, if that's the case, I'm not very spiritual at all. Because I am not happy and grateful and feeling wonderful about this magnificent life at all.
Mhm.
And then I thought to myself, something that I had heard before but had never been willing to embrace. And I said to myself, well, what if all these health issues and relationship and abundance and poverty issues, what if they're not making me sad and miserable at all? What if I'm unhappy and miserable and that's what's causing all these things in my life?
Mm.
So with that switch in my psyche, I started focusing on finding ways to make myself feel happy. Despite anything going on around me, happiness is something I realized you don't wait for when the world finally gives you what you want. Happiness is something you create. It's an inner effort and an inner change. And then I went on to, joining that with gratitude, building up my courage and confidence, and finding faith. And not faith in an external deity and not faith in any particular religious tradition, but faith in myself and my possibilities and the divinity of this world, that it's all good and it's all wonderful. And I can believe in myself and believe in life.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through all those changes and everything got better. And my health right now, I'm 74 years old. It's better than I've been since I was 19. I'm making more money than I've ever made in my life. My romantic life is really good. Everything just got better and frankly wonderful. And
it was because you focused on it, maybe. Yeah. And maybe it was because you focused on that? Do you think that was the turning point? Wow.
Yeah, it was focusing on it. It was changing myself. One of the things I did was I started using a lot of affirmations, which were reminding me of things that is not how I usually thought about things. But I didn't just say these affirmations now and again. I actually made myself some slideshows online with one affirmation after another. And I watched these every morning for like an hour or two, really retraining my brain and my heart to think and feel differently. And you don't get that from just saying I feel good, I am wealthy, half a dozen times. Yeah. And meanwhile, your inner subconscious voice is saying, no, you're not, no, you're not, no, you're not. It takes time, and it takes really shifting and repetition and just working on opening up and believing in oneself.
Believing in oneself too. There you go. Yeah. It sounds like you were kind of reprogramming yourself, basically,
Yes. Yes.
creating a new engineering in your mind, and then also maybe the visualization of what you're working on, to um, uh, the visualization helps with the kind of manifestation, because your brain goes, okay, well, this is what he wants. Let's help him get here from there, or there from here, I should say. Um, so it sounds like that's kind of what that did for you.
Yeah, and it is rewiring oneself
Mm-hmm.
so that one stops repeating all the negative, unnecessary lies about how unworthy and horrible I am.
Ah,
You
yeah.
rewire those messages.
Mhm,
And I mentioned affirmations. I also use a lot of visualizations. And the
mhm,
wonderful thing about visualizations, well, my dad was a salesman, and I remember him telling me that he would stand outside the door of a client for several minutes before knocking on the door.
mm,
And he'd picture himself having a really successful meeting with this guy and getting a sale. And
mhm.
he'd get that image embedded in his mind, and then he'd knock on the door. And he always did much better than when he didn't do that.
Yeah.
And now we know that when you visualize something vividly and maybe over and over again, your your brain doesn't know the difference between a physical world occurrence and a
Mhm,
vividly imagined occurrence.
mm,
Your body gets the same chemical changes, your emotions shift the same way. It
mhm,
doesn't know the difference. So if you just keep repeating, visualizing the life you want and how you want it to be, that's part of rewiring your subconscious mind and your brain and your heart as
mhm.
well.
Yeah. What you focus on is what you get. There's two people,
Yeah.
or I think this is for Anthony Robbins. There's two people that can go to a party, and depend upon their filters and how they see things, one person can see, people that are, no one's having fun at the party, everyone's bored. And another person can see the life of the party, where everyone's having fun and everyone's enjoying, the party, and they'll both come away with two different perceptions of that party.
Yeah.
One will come back and go, "Oh, that was I saw nothing but people having a bad time." And so, what's interesting is, depend upon you, either perception is true technically,
Yeah.
but it can shape your future. And what you tend to focus on, I think enough motivational people have taught us this, so talked about it. What you focus on is what you get. So if you focus on, I'm miserable, I'm horrible, I'm unworthy, or
Exactly.
whatever your spin is, we sometimes have that ego mind that likes to beat the hell out of us. There you are. So tell us a little bit more about you and your journey. When did you first start writing books? How many books do you have?
I have a 11, I think, right now. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. I started, well, my first book was in the late 1980s, and it was my years in New York City practicing chiropractic and doing a lot of holistic work, and
Hmm.
and that book was about holistic health and environmental issues.
Hmm.
And then I didn't write again until many years later,
Hmm.
in the early, uh, well, maybe the late 90s. Um, I'd written a master's thesis when I was quite young on the history and philosophy of science, and I found this a very interesting thing. And I knew that one day I was going to get back to this subject,
Hmm.
and I did in the late '90s. I got back to it and I started writing, and it took me on a journey that I wasn't expecting. As I was writing, and then something new would come up, and then something new, and I ended up thinking that I was writing kind of a history of ideas.
Hmm.
And I got to a point after talking about the Greeks where I decided that I really should talk about Genesis and the Hebrew tradition a little bit because it has such a huge effect on Western civilization.
Hmm.
And I should say something about it, even though it wasn't really my interest at all. So I went back and I read Genesis. And as I'm reading these words, they they opened up a whole new meaning to me. I
Hmm.
wasn't interested in the alleged history, and I wasn't interested in the fantastic images of miracles and completely irrational things. And I wasn't interested in the social messages about morality and how to behave in society. which are so contradictory throughout the scriptures.
Yeah.
None of that was what I found really interesting. What I found interesting was the symbolism that the stories represented.
Huh.
And what I found was that this, just to try and put it in a nutshell, the story of the Hebrews traveling from enslavement in Egypt to freedom and communion with God in the promised land, that journey is a symbolic expression of instructions for my inner journey from being enslaved to this material consciousness to reaching spiritual awakening and communing with divinity. And the Greek story of Demeter and Persephone going from Hades back to Olympus is the same story, told with different characters, but the same meaning. And Christ's journey from the Jordan River to the cross is the same journey. And I realize that all religions, at least in the West where we tell these stories, all these stories are telling the same story on the inside. It's how to do it. It's not about those people walked from here to there on Tuesday. It's about what you're doing in your life right now and where you want to go next. So several of my books are about that. I wrote about the scriptures, and I wrote about the Quran, and I wrote about mythology in Greece. And one of the things I discovered was that at every step along the way, there's a male and a female aspect to the story. It's not just Abraham, it's Abraham and Sarah. It's not just Isaac, it's Isaac and Rebecca. It's not just Moses, it's Moses and Miriam. It's Jesus and Mary. There's always a male and female at every step along the way. And the stories of the women in the scriptures are usually ignored or belittled as unimportant. But if you really dig into them symbolically, they're just extraordinary. And so I wrote a little volume just taking those stories of the women in the Bible and what those stories mean psychologically and spiritually.
Oh, there you go.
So I added that.
There
and
you
then
go.
a few other things. And then I didn't write for a while. Then I wrote a book of essays on American cultural life and the result of our losing so much of our spiritual world into either a purely economic and commercial world, or on the other extreme, a fundamentalist spiritual world. And it takes away real spirituality and what's happened to the country. And I wrote essays about that. And then a few years went by again, and then I made the change in my life that I was telling you about before and wrote this book, which came out this past fall.
All right. Well, there you go. So what do you hope people come away with when they read the book and see what's inside of it?
I hope they come away with, one, recognizing deeply and earnestly how magnificent we all are. That one is a truly sacred divine being with all possibilities, beloved by the universe, and filled with all the power of creating the life that we want to have. And that we are just such extraordinary beings, despite so much of society telling us to be timid and shy and not to go for what you want and to not do this and not do that and not feel proud of your life and excited about life. And I hope to get people past that. And then I hope to give them a lot of tools to really make those changes.
There you go. This book doesn't explain, it awakens. And a conversation with your soul, guiding you to your limitless potential and all your creative power.
That was from a review someone left.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. And it builds out master spiritual techniques that give birth to your higher self. Do you want to tease out a few of the techniques you offer in the book?
Yes, the first one is actually a clearing away of limiting beliefs. And I do that. I describe it in the book, and I do it with my patients by getting them into a deep meditative state, doing a kind of countdown to get them into a theta hypnotic kind of state, and then having them ask their own higher self some questions when they're in a state where they will listen to responses from their higher being. And the basic two questions are, what am I believing about myself that's making me stuck in this situation that I don't want? and hearing what your higher guidance tells you. And the other basic question is, what am I afraid would happen if I became who I really wish to be? And again, listening for what your higher guidance tells you. Then moving on to, well, I have a short chapter on each of all these tools. So there's affirmations and how to do them well, how to do them right, how to do them most effectively. Visualization, same thing. Learning to be creative and not reactive to the world, maintaining one's equanimity, learning to do that and not just reacting to the world and sending out negative vibrations every time someone cuts you off in traffic. At the same time, being gentle with yourself and realizing you're human. But learning to not react, learning to feel gratitude. And in my work with gratitude, after working on, I can be grateful for this, I can be grateful for that, and all these things in my life that I could be grateful for, finally getting to the place where I realize I'm grateful to be alive in this magnificent universe.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for all of it. Thank you for this extraordinary experience. And that needed to be backed up with some self-confidence and, getting rid of feelings of unworthiness. I have tools for that, tools for feeling courageous in life. And then faith and prayer. And the interesting thing to me about prayer is they're really just affirmations. Prayer should be said the same way, a positive, present experience of having and being, not wanting and trying, but having and experiencing it. It's a bit more devotional and comes from your heart than affirmations that come from your mind. So it's rewiring one or the other. And one of the interesting things I learned about faith that made me explore that in my life was one of the things Jesus says, I think it's in Matthew, he says, when you pray, believe that you already have what you're asking for, and it will be yours. And that's what I think he meant about faith when he healed people and said, your faith healed you. He didn't. He said, you had faith that you have what you want, and now it's yours.
We've had Olympian coaches on the show and a number of other people that talk about, getting the best results out of yourself. And a lot of times at those Olympic events or in fitness related, I guess, sports related events, they'll walk through it in their mind. They'll visualize it in their mind and they prep their mind so that, there's good examples of the Super Bowl. They say one of the problems with the Super Bowl is when you first get on there, it takes you about half an hour to get your jitters out. Cause you're in this, you grew up dreaming of playing in the Super Bowl. You're finally here. You've done the work. You're beaten up after a year of playing the game, and at least for that season, and here you are. You're in the show, and it can throw you because it's like your dream is at the doorstep, and you've got to make it happen to get it through the door, and so sometimes in that first 20 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, we've seen whole games go unrepairably wrong for somebody. And but the visualization helps you when you get there, approach any sort of one of these events or whatever you're trying to do, you feel more comfortable because you feel more at home in that space because you've walked through it in your mind. And a lot of Olympians, I think we had some Olympic coaches on, and they would train that with their athletes. They would visualize it. They would see themselves winning. They would see themselves standing on the final thing, and because of it, they would get better performance out of themselves.
Absolutely, and I would say that salesmen and athletes have been using this for years and years, maybe before other people got to realize the value of it. One of the first experiments, maybe the first experiment, was back in the 70s. A psychologist, I can't remember his name. Sorry, it's in my book. He took a group of young teenage boys who loved playing basketball, and he had them shooting foul shots. And he divided them into two groups. And each group, he had them all shoot a bunch of foul shots and get some measure of how good they were.
Mhm.
And then he divided them into two equal kinds of groups where they had the same abilities overall. And then he told one group that for the next 30 days, they were to come to the gym every day and practice shooting foul shots for an hour.
Mhm.
And the other group for 30 days was not allowed to go to the gym, but they were to sit for an hour and imagine shooting foul shots and imagine them
Ah.
all going through the hoop.
Uh-huh.
And after 30 days, he brought them together. And
Mhm.
the first group who'd been there did much better.
Wow.
And the second group who hadn't did equally much better.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
That's just crazy. The power of visualization, the power of our mind. I mean, like you talk about in your book, the mind is very important. Now, I noticed on your website you do have some services. I don't know if we want to plug in them. There's a healing session, sabotaging beliefs. Is that an offering you want to put out there?
Well, yes, and I see people live. I'm here in Woodstock, New York, but I also see people on Zoom sometimes if they want
Okay.
to do a healing session with me from anywhere in the world on Zoom. I do two basic things. I work on your getting your body relaxed and free of energy blockages, and I do that with energy work, relaxation, music and sound, gentle touch.
Mhm.
I do some cranial work, which some of your listeners may have heard of, cranial balancing work and
Mm.
muscle balancing work, so that the blockages are opened up, because the real healer is you. It's
Mm.
self-healing, but you have to let in these healing energies. And when we're tight and blocked, and our mind is chattering, and we're angry enough, we block it all out.
Mhm.
So I open up all those channels so that you can start letting in that energy to heal. Then I actually do a second session with people, and we delve into getting down into those limiting beliefs. And you don't dissolve a limiting belief. It has nowhere to go. Nothing disappears in the world, but you can dissolve your attachment to them
Mhm.
and switch your focus and your attachment to what you want and the positive things you want, and change your beliefs to focus on those beliefs. And the other things will just fade away from your life.
Oh, wow. There you go. So as we go out, anything more you want to talk to us or plug while you're on the show?
Well, the only other thing I plug is I am working on an online course,
Mhm.
which I hope I'll be done within the fall. And I would like to encourage and ask and encourage people to visit my website.
Mhm.
On the one hand, they'll find out more about me, more about my practice, and more about all my books.
Mhm.
And if they sign my email subscription, um, they'll be the first to know about the new course when it comes out. But also, when you fill in the subscription form, I send you a PDF of a book I wrote just a few years ago called "The Real Cause of Pain and Sickness and What You Can Do About It."
Okay.
And I think it's a very effective little book for self-understanding and self-healing. And that's just free.
Okay. There you go. And people can subscribe on the show and get familiar with what you're doing there.
Yes.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you
Thank
go.
you.
So thank you very much for coming on the show. Give us your .coms one more time as we go out, wherever you want people to
Okay.
follow you.
www.andrewcort.com.
Mhm.
And that's again CORT, andrewcort.com.
Mhm.
You can also find me by just looking up my name on Facebook and TikTok. If you go to TikTok, I have lots of videos, mostly about the work in the book.
Okay.
So,
There you go.
mm,
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. Very
thank you.
inspiring. Lots of great stuff there people can share to improve the quality of lives. And you know what you focus on is what you get. So thank you very much for coming on. Thanks,
Thank you,
for
Chris.
Thank you. Thanks, audience, for tuning in. Order the book wherever fine books are sold. It is called Create Yourself Anew, From Above Down, by choosing who and what you prefer to be in this multiverse of all possibilities. Out September 10th, 2024. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss One, the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.